glad you're back, and we are excited about being able to share some more information with you. Also, I want to share with all of you that I really appreciated the thoughtful comments that you all made during the training last week. And by thoughtful, I mean they were nice, but I really mean thoughtful. You thought about things and gave responses that were very helpful. So once again, thank you, and we're looking forward to another good discussion, even though you're on the quiet side, but I do read those, and so does Katie, who's moderating. And again, a thanks to Michaela, who's doing the technical stuff. If you start to struggle with technical stuff, type in the box. Michaela will see it. Also, Mary Claire has graciously agreed, Mary Claire Litzen, to help us do the captioning tonight. It is not going to be a straight word-for-word captioning. We're still working on, it's a new aspect of Illuminate, and so we're still trying to find out more about it. But Mary Claire is going to step in and, of course, help. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to just remember that the little box that has my picture in it, you can turn it off anytime you want, or you can just move it if you need to go ahead and see either the slides or the videos. You can move it all around if you want. So I want to do just a quick review. A reminder that last week we covered a definition of deafblindness, other phrases that are used to describe this population, such as combined visual impairment and hearing loss, combined vision and hearing loss, dual sensory impairments, deafblindness with a hyphen, and deafblindness with no hyphen. The diversity of this population through the description and the videos, and why minimal or mild is not really minimal or mild for this group of students, and identifying the needs of this diverse group of children and youth and their challenges. And what I'd like to do today is, before we get started, we're going to do a little pop quiz, but I'm not going to be grading you at all. There's no way that I'm going to do that, but I would like you to locate the small green check mark that's right down below where it shows all of the participants, that window, and you'll see a green check mark, and that's going to stand for true, and the red X below it is going to stand for false. So what I'd like you to do is, I have 4 questions, I believe, yes, 4 statements, and I'd like you to identify whether or not you think they're true or false. Like I said, I'm not grading you. So here we go. Number 1, remember the green check is true, the red X is false. For a student to be qualified in the state of Washington as deaf-blind, he or she must have a profound hearing loss and be legally blind. I'll read it one more time. For a student to be qualified in the state of Washington as deaf-blind, he or she must have a profound hearing loss and be legally blind. So we have a great many red X's, which stand for false, and that is the correct answer. Good job, you guys. All right, next question. We're going to erase all of those, and we'll give you a chance to go again. All right, number 2. Another phrase people use to describe a child who is deafblind is that the child has a combined hearing and vision loss. I'll say it again. Another phrase people use to describe a child who is deafblind is the child has a combined hearing and vision loss. Green means true, red means no, false. All right, a lot of green checks. Good job, everybody. Wonderful, thank you. Question number 3. A major reason why it is so important to identify these children is that the 2 major senses taught to in school is a child's vision and his hearing. I'm going to read it again. True or false? A major reason why it is so important to identify these children is that the 2 major senses that are taught to in school is a child's vision and his hearing. Great. All right. Good. That's true. Excellent. And the last one, true or false statement, is A major challenge for students who have dual sensory impairments is the pace at which information and communication happens in general ed and special ed classes. I'll read it again. A major challenge for students who have dual sensory impairments is the pace at which information and communication happens in general ed and special ed classes. And a whole bunch of truths to that. Great. Thank you. All right. I want to ask a question of you, and I want you to think about this for a moment. And how many of you would have preferred if I had put the question up on the screen in the PowerPoint? Put a green check if you would have preferred if I had written it as well as spoken it. Yeah, so one of the things we know is that about 80% of us tend to be visual learners or visual and tactile learners or kinesthetic learners, and about 20% of us tend to be auditory learners. And it's interesting that I think if we figured out the percentage, it would probably be close to the number of green checks. And those of you who didn't answer that, you would have preferred it. So once again, that's that point that I want to make about the idea that people actually have a preference about how they take information in as well as give it out, but more importantly, how they get the information. And once again, some of you are great with the auditory, but for some of you, you really visually wanted to see that question. And even though I read it twice exactly the same way, it was still didn't work for you the best way. So once again, let's think about all those different senses that could be used with this group of students and help those students. Okay, some of the outcomes for today are to identify how implementation of components for any child or youth with combined vision and hearing loss is different from other children, and how to reduce sensory overload for children and youth with dual sensory impairments or dual sensory disabilities, and identify components that may not yet be a part of the student's program with whom you're working, and maybe need to be further strengthened, or that you don't know about, or how to up it, maybe to improve it once you've thought more about it. All right. Just a reminder, we had this same map last week, and that's a reminder to you that this was the 2009 census for kids with deaf blindness in the state of Washington, and there were 233 students, and 88 school districts serve those students. So a reminder once again about the fact that I mentioned to you that this year, right now, we have 222 students, and I said to you last week that out of the 222 students, 217 of those students have disabilities in addition to their vision and hearing loss. So tonight we're actually going to be working and looking at videos of one young man who does have additional disabilities, and we're going to focus on him through the videos, but we're also going to talk about students who have more academic level skills. I think I remember one of you mentioned last week that it was nice to see a student who does have a combined vision and hearing loss without additional disabilities, and that was the young girl talking about her interpreter, Marissa. So we'll go ahead and let's look at successful educational programs for all students, okay? That's really what we want to look at. It's true for all students. And so this is typical of most programs. Think in terms of there's collaboration, everybody collaborates, that we have assessment, planning, scheduling, support for the student, team implementation of the learning, monitoring the student progress, making adjustments in the learning activities so that the student can continue, so that tweaking of it, and then the student's success and progress. And that's pretty typical in most schools for general ed students as well as students who are in special ed. Now, is it any different for a student with a combined vision and hearing loss? Well, the answer is no, but how it is done is different. How it is done. And the number of people who must collaborate is increased dramatically. So those are two pieces, and though we will be talking about those same components of a good educational plan, of a good educational program for students, we're also going to be looking at the fact that it's done differently. Okay? So, collaboration is truly what holds a program together for students with combined vision and hearing loss. The times that some of us who go out and provide technical assistance, we'll see programs that are totally committed to collaborating and to communicating with each other so that they can pull off an excellent program for their students. Occasionally we go into a school district and the school district has never ever had a student with a combined vision or hearing loss before, and therefore they're at, okay, just tell me what I have to do. What do we need to do? So, and that's great. People that are open that way saying, I'm not sure. Or people may have somebody on their team and they've had some experience and said, we know this much about a child who has a combined vision and hearing loss or who is deafblind. We know to do this and this and this, but we're doing those things and we think we need to know more. So collaboration is crucial. I can't emphasize it enough. And so for you all as a team to find ways to collaborate with each other, and in this I'm talking about the family too. And I know that sometimes there are families that are great at collaboration and they want to do it, they want to know about it, they want to be a part of it, and we occasionally find families that are sometimes under a great deal of stress that they can't focus on it. And that's a little bit trickier, but it doesn't mean we in education don't keep trying that collaboration and include. And how do we include? So, how many people, and this is going to be an A, B, C, D, and, Michaela, would you remind me where that happens? How people pick A, B, C, or D? I forgot.
It will be instead of the green check and the red X. So let me switch that over right now and then they'll have that option. But we need to play the video first, is that correct?
Actually, oh yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry, you guys. We're really trying to do this, but it's like, okay, how many, I think it's like Katie said, how many people does it take to pull off one of these Illuminate trainings? And it's more than you may think. Also, a reminder, I think everybody here was here last week. It's the reminder that we're going through the Vimeo system, so you're going to see the word Vimeo up there when Michaela brings it up, the first video. And this is a student, and his name is Christopher. And because all of the videos are going to show Christopher tonight, when Mary Claire is doing the closed captioning, she's going to go ahead and just use a capital C or a C for Christopher. This is what I'd like you to really look at when we see this video is, number one, pay attention to what Christopher's doing. Pay attention to what his paraeducator is doing as much as you can. Take a look at what the activity is.
Good job. Come on. Look. Here's your slinky. No, we're not done. There you go. Come on. Come on. Great job, Christopher. Good job. Come on. You're not quite there. It's right here. It's right here. It's right here. You see it? You're going to walk right over it. You're going to walk right over it. It's right there.
Okay, go ahead. If you're still watching the video, could you put a red X in the box? I just want to make sure everybody saw it. Okay. So here's, oops, there's one person who isn't finished watching.
But Kathee, it's not up anymore, so
Okay.
the video's not up anymore, so you might as well go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so here's the question. There's an A, B, C, D at the bottom where the green check and the red X is. You're going to click on the one that you have as the answer. And it looks like everybody's putting their answer in, so I guess I don't have to read this to anybody. But we're talking about how many people do you think it took to get purposeful movement with Chris? And it's one, A is one person, a paraeducator, B is one person, a physical therapist, C is two people, the paraeducator and the physical therapist, and D is the four, a paraeducator, a physical therapist, a teacher of the visually impaired, referred to as a TVI, and a deafblind specialist. And the majority of people have put in D, and so D is correct. So, I'm sorry, I just got a note and I had to read it. So how many, so D is correct, and in this case, what happens often for people is that there's one person, quote, in charge of something, and they just tell another person, a paraeducator if they're working one-on-one with a student, or they'll tell them what they need to do. In this case, it really took all of us talking and the rest of the team, and there were 8 team members, including the family. And I want you to think about that because the discussion in school was we need to get him moving. He doesn't particularly like to move. So for all of you, I would like to recommend that you just grab a piece of paper. This is nothing you're going to send me. It's just something for you to scribble some notes on about Christopher because we're going to be talking about him, and I'd like you to be able to go back and refer to some notes that you've made. So think in terms of how many people does it really take to make something happen? And in this case, it was the idea that if we understand what motivates a child, what he likes or dislikes, that we could add that piece in. I would not recommend that every child who has a vision and hearing loss be doing that activity. That activity was designed for Christopher based on what Christopher likes, and he happens to love slinkings. And I'm sure some of you saw how messed up that slinky was. Well, you can see how much he likes it. And that wasn't the first slinky he ever had. So keep in mind that that paraeducator was there trying to figure out, so it was that collaboration piece that I've been talking about, how important it is to be able to collaborate. And you can collaborate within the core team, but you have to inform everybody else so that when they're in working with the child or a part of the group, that they understand what's happening. Okay. Great answers, everybody. There's the right answer. So without collaboration, the student suffers and the support starts to crumble. And unfortunately, this is a little bit more frequently seen than what any of us would like, including the people with whom the collaboration is occurring. Without that collaboration, there's a problem. You're set up for that student not to make the kind of progress he or she can do. And then what we do is we see goals and objectives that are set up for year after year after year. Or after 2 years, everybody decides it's not worth doing this with the student. And it's because there are people, you have to be able to set it up so that the child sees it. Okay? All right. Assessment. So that's the first piece. When we talked about that pyramid, at the bottom was the word assessment. And so how do I gather? Do we do assessment with these students? Of course we do. So that's no different than for any other student. But how I gather that assessment information and how I use it will look different. So standard assessment tools most often end up having to be discarded. And new tools that incorporate families and observation are crucial. And some of you already know this, and for those of you who don't, if you're just going to give a standard assessment, especially some that have been designed for children who have normal or typical developing vision and typical developing hearing, you are already penalizing that student. So you're going to have to toss out many of the assessment tools that you typically use. So you've got family involvement with the assessment. You're asking and interviewing families and asking them questions. What does Christopher like? What does he like to do? What doesn't he like? And don't just stop at the parents. If there are grandparents that are involved closely, if there are brothers and sisters, I've gotten some of the best information from brothers and sisters, and sometimes I get the information of what the child who has the dual sensory impairment doesn't like. Because, you know, they get tired of their brother or sister, you know, getting in the middle of all their stuff. And so with that, you want to really look at how that happens. But how is it that the child understands what you're telling him? How do you understand what the child does? So that family involvement is highly important, because how that child is at home is not necessarily how he is at school. And of course, the clinical and medical assessments that we go through, getting hearing assessments, vision assessments, other medical conditions that require assessment, reading assessments. For some of the students who are academic, you're looking at reading assessments. So for those students who are more academic, you may be using some of the other tools or assessment tools that the other students use, but you may have to add something to it. You may have to modify it, change it, or adapt it. And a good example is by using an interpreter to go ahead and sign information to the student who may be deaf-blind but can see well enough to see the interpreter, or the interpreter may be tactily interpreting the directions for the student to do. Functional assessments. The idea of an assessment that has nothing to do with anything. So I'm going to go see how many vocabulary words this child has, and I don't connect it with anything that is meaningful to him, may show him at a much lower vocabulary level than had I used the vocabulary within activities and his knowledge base. And then observation is crucial, and I think for all of us, it's like, when do I find the time to observe? And, you know, I'm fortunate because I can come in the classroom and watch some things and say or show you a few things when I'm in there. But that's another reason I really highly recommend people use videotape. You know, you can set that video camera up and you can be teaching and later take a look at it. And then environmental assessments that include the natural environments. You know, just had a phone conversation this morning, and we're talking about how the child does in activities of daily living at school versus how he does at activities of daily living at home. And that they are very, very different. The child is much more competent at home because he is more comfortable, he knows where things are, he doesn't have a lot of people pressing around him, and for him that's difficult. So one of the things you want to start to look at is what natural environment does it occur in? Not do I take it out of its natural environment and make this an artificial assessment. This group really does poorly in artificial assessments. And then sometimes I'm asked the question, so what is this student's cognitive level? And I want to pose to you first, in all your different positions, because I noticed several people are teachers, but I also saw paraeducators, I saw speech and language people, I think I saw a physical therapist in that group. There are people that may be school psychs and families. But when you are looking for the student's cognitive level, meaning how many intellectual problems does he have, what do you want to know? What are you really asking when you ask what is the student's cognitive level? What do you really want to know? And so I'm going to ask you I just want to take a moment and go ahead and have you just jot a few things. When you hear somebody talk about a child's cognitive level, what does that matter to how you educate the child? and just step out and, say it. I know this is a real tough area. It's a tough area for families, and it's a tough area for schools. But why is it that you need to know that cognitive level? One point is to make goals for the future. I need to know where they currently are. I like to make goals for them. The cognitive level, how does that affect how you educate the child? So how does it? If I know, if somebody tells me that this child has a cognitive disability, or an old word years ago that would have been used was mental retardation, how much do you need to know about that? Why does there need to be an assessment? To know where to begin in teaching skills, where they are. What concepts do they have that are appropriate for their age? It's good to get an accurate baseline to build from and to match skills to functional and academic activities. It helps you understand where to start. I learn what they already know and what skills and concepts. You do not want to teach above or below the level. Where do you start? What is functional? So these are all comments made by people, and I totally understand what you're saying. And what if somebody wanted to assess you and they started asking you questions about Mars, about all those things, okay, and you know nothing about Mars other than its planet. And I start giving you some very detailed vocabulary about the atmosphere and about what the ground is made of, etc. What would you look like if you didn't know more than it is a planet? What would I look like? And what I would look like is I would look stupid. That's the honest goodness truth, because I can't tell you much about Mars. So what I want you to think about is, what are the kinds of questions we ask? What are the observations that we make? Somebody said to me, so what way, how do we get the best information about that child's cognition when vision and hearing are the two ways we ask questions, and we expect everybody to have those intact in order to actually be able to show us what they know? We just talked about assessment, and we talked about functional assessments. What can the child do within the environment? What about some of our students who are very physically involved and don't have the ability to even walk across the room to show you something? And so if I say stand up and go to the door or go to your bedroom, and that's very functional, but that child's not capable of standing up and going to the bedroom, do I make an assumption that he has a cognitive disability? Those are some of the questions I want to push you about, not because it's not an okay thing to do, but it is an important thing not to underestimate this group of children. And I don't care what their multiple disabilities are. We make judgments of children who are nonverbal, who are not able to explain things or demonstrate things to us because they don't have their vision and hearing intact. So if this is not about, nobody should ever ask about the cognitive level of the child. I'm just telling you that the way we do assessments, we are not going to get something accurate. We are going to get some guesses. And two things that I look for a sense of humor in the child, and I also look for their problem-solving abilities. And that means I have to look for, do they have any opportunities to solve problems? Because some of us are so caretaking, we step in and fix it before the child's ever had a chance to struggle with it, to figure something out, to solve his own problem. And those are two things I look for, because they are indicators for me that this child has a higher level of thinking of abstract thinking. So it's just something I want to put out there for you to think about. And if I already know what the child enjoys doing, if I know what his age is, if I know what how the family communicates with him and how other people communicate with him, then I can start looking at that and saying, does it matter if this child is mentally retarded or has an intellectual disability? I think that's the new wording that's coming down from the federal government, an intellectual disability. Does it matter? And yes, it may matter because I may have to go more slowly with the child. I may have to give him more practice opportunities. But if I know where he is right now by what he does and by observation and interviewing and using a few tools that are useful, then what I can do is actually start to develop a program and plan without knowing, yes, this child has a cognitive disability. In most cases for our kids who have both a vision and hearing loss, they already have other disabilities, and it's not like you're just trying to say this child has a mental disability or an intellectual disability or is mentally retarded or the words. Mentally retarded is an old word, but I'm trying to use a variety of phrases so that everybody's on the same page. So this one is a tricky one. So when you think about Christopher crawling across the floor in the video that most of us saw, and the idea was to get him purposefully moving so that he sees a reason to move. Now Christopher has vision, and it goes out about 8 inches from his eyes. And he also has a cortical vision impairment, which means that the processing piece is that when that information gets up to the brain, he does not process it the same way you and I do. And that some days he has better vision than other days. So keep that in mind about Christopher. And when you're sitting there thinking about planning, think about, does it matter if I know that he has a severe cognitive disability or a mild cognitive disability or no cognitive disability at all? Why would that matter? And I just want you to think about that. And like I said, this does not mean that no one does a cognitive assessment. And here's a comment made. I'm coming from a preschool perspective, and I think assessment is necessary to even qualify for services. And then other assessments are to monitor progress. I think your assessments have a fair, unfair possibility. I think if your assessment has a fair, unfair possibility, then I think your assessments aren't really that good of a tool. And that's true. And coming from preschool, if you are needing to qualify the child, that's a different issue than trying to teach to what the child's needs are. And right now I'm not talking about the qualification of students, but that's a great point you bring up, Catherine. So assessment. This is a tool. It's called Assessing Communication and Learning in Young Children who are deafblind or have multiple disabilities. And this was written by Charity Rowland, and if you go to the URL that's down there, you can actually find out about this book, and I think at the present time you can download this book. But it talks about some of the different tools that people use, and what she did was by surveying a whole variety of people who work with kids who are deafblind and with multiple disabilities, she talks about the pros and the cons of some of the tests. So that would be useful for some people. And I want to make sure you all have enough time if you want to write that down. And Katie, maybe you could just type that one if you don't mind, so that people can access it that way.
The URL, Kathee? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. There we go.
Got it.
Okay, thanks, Michaela. And then the same with this. This is called Child-Guided Strategies, the Van Dyke Approach to Assessment for Understanding Children and Youth with Sensory Impairments and Multiple Disabilities. And this is from the American Printing House for the Blind. And this is not a big, long book. I've loaned it to a couple school districts for students who have additional disabilities. Yes, Michael, we will make the PowerPoint available. Oh, Michaela, remind me, we were going to have people, we were going to give them a site they could go to pull it off and download it. Is that right?
Yes. It will be available. We're not exactly sure how. It will be available after the series is over, though.
Yeah. Okay, but we could actually put these out in an email. In the next email, we'll put the URLs out, Michael. And then there's a recorded webinar on tools for assessment, and this was the first one that I talked about with Charity Rowland, the first slide I showed you. This is actually a recorded training that she did on that tool, but she talks more, it's not the training of the tool as much as the information they found out and the data. And this is also another URL that you can go to. So I want to make sure you had a chance to see some different assessments. So on this video, I want you to watch very carefully, not just what the paraeducator says to him, but how she interacts with him. And also, I'd like you to take a look and watch carefully what she does with him and his feet as he's getting his AFOs on.
Christopher, no sleeping. Okay. So here, come on. Good job. Good job.
Okay. All right. So, what did you see happen when Kelly was trying to get him to put his foot into the AFO? And go ahead and just type what you saw. He lifted his foot for her. She gave him wait time and tactile cues. She used both tactile and vestibular input to engage him first. She waited, gave him a cue. She had to tap his foot to get him to lift it. He tried to help her. She used music rocking and gave him time to participate in the task. So you all started to pick up very important aspects of active learning. I don't have the word active learning written down anywhere on this presentation, but active learning, he must be active at whatever level he can be active. Now, for a child, it might be that he can only lift one finger or his baby finger. It may be that he can use his eyes to give information so that he's moving his eyes or his head to see something or indicate something. He may change his breathing pattern. That may be some indication to me. So I want to get to things that we sometimes don't think about. But in Christopher's case, because Kelly was consistently doing that every day, it was always the right foot first. It was then the left foot. So Christopher starts to get the idea that it's happening. So think in terms of, I saw the word he tried to help her. It wasn't him trying to help her. It was her waiting for him to get that foot into the AFO to help lift it. Okay? And we sometimes think about it, you know, thanks for helping me. But the reality of it is Kelly's goal, the paraeducators, Kelly's goal was, I am going to wait, and if I have to finally tap him, I'll tap his foot slightly, but then I'm still waiting. So waiting is a huge piece of letting kids become active learners.